Good afternoon. Welcome to Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, September 17. First, we have roll call. Kim, may we have roll call, please?
Thank you, Council President. Council President Kaur.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce.
Here.
Councilmember Boyd.
Here.
Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Troutner.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And next up is agenda approval. Any changes to the agenda? No, may I have a motion, please?
So move. Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on. First up, we have approval of minutes for September 3, 2024.
So move. Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right, next up, payment of bills. May I have a motion, please?
So move. Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right. July 2024 financial report. We have Michelle Ferguson here. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Michelle Ferguson, and I'm the Financial Planning Manager, and I will be presenting the July 2024 monthly financial report. First slide is highlighted at the top is the all revenue sources for the general fund. So overall, the general fund revenues are doing well. May and June revenues, if you can see highlighted kind of in that orange color, are lower than they were last year at this time, but April and July are higher than they were at this time. So overall, though, when you look at the whole year through July, revenues are almost $900,000 over where it was at this time last year. So it is doing well, and we are expecting that to continue through the rest of the year. The next slide, highlighted down at the bottom, are all the other revenues. So these are all the other revenue categories that are not taxes. So again, all these categories are doing well. All the revenues are coming in higher than they were last year at this time, with the exception of the intergovernmental revenues. And the only reason for that is that there was a one-time grant that was received in 2023 that's kind of making it look like it's coming in lower, but overall for the consistent revenues that we receive is coming in a little slightly higher. So now that the year is halfway done, we have included estimated actuals on the report. So for the general fund, since we're 7 months through the year, if you look at the straight line method, you would assume that 58% of the revenues should have received and 58% of expenditures should have been spent. Right now, revenues are at 57% and expenditures are at 52%. Expenditures are estimated to come in about $2.5 million under budget, and revenues are expected to come in about $5 million over budget. The two revenue categories that have the highest variance from budget to estimated actuals are the B&O tax and the miscellaneous revenue. B&O tax is estimated to come in about $1 million higher than budget, and miscellaneous revenue is estimated to come in about $2 million higher, and that's mostly due to the interest income that we're receiving from all the investments that we have.
Just clarification, you said the revenue is $5 million higher and the expense is $2 million lower?
Mm-hmm. That's what estimated or will be at the end of the year.
Okay.
So for all the other funds, highlighted on this slide are the Capital Resources Fund and the Criminal Justice Fund. And these are highlighted just because the revenue variance from budget to estimated actuals are quite a bit higher than in any of the other funds. The revenues in the Capital Resources Fund are higher due to REIT as well as the interest income. So interest income is just going to be kind of a theme as we talk about revenues through the rest of the year, because for most of the funds, they already have hit budget levels, and by the end of the year, they'll probably be double. So the REIT is estimated to come in about $1 million higher than budgeted, and REIT was purposely budgeted a little bit low based on market conditions. We didn't want to overestimate our revenues. So the good news is they're coming in higher. And then for criminal justice revenues, school zone cameras, unfortunately, are estimated to come in about $400,000 lower than they have been seen in the last few years. But these red light cameras are estimated to be about $1.5 million over where they were last year. But they did add cameras, and so that's the reason for the large increase from last year to this year. Then highlighted on this slide is the sewer utility fund. Not because it's in trouble, but there may be a need for a budget change at the end of the year because of the expenditures are coming in higher, but so are the revenues. So the revenues will cover the expenditures. But if you recall, the King County pass-through for sewer is, we have to show all of the expenditures for that, which makes up 2/3 of the fund. King County had a 5.75 increase in the sewer rates that they charge, so which was not known at the time of the budget when the budget was developed. So it is expected to come in slightly higher. Right now, not so sure. That's why it's just the budget is the same as the estimated actuals. So we'll keep a monitor on that as the year goes on. And then lastly is the Information Technology Fund. We don't talk about it too often. They're usually pretty consistent. But revenues are expected to come in lower than they have been in the last few years. And that is because of the cable utility tax. That's receipted in the general fund, but then we take that and transfer it to the IT fund. And because those revenues are coming in lower, it then affects this fund as well. So we'll see how that goes at the rest of the year, but revenues for that are about $10,000 less a month than they have been in the last few years. And that's the end of the presentation. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Troutner?
Thank you, Council President. So then moving forward, when we see like year after year, some of these things going down, we're looking ahead into like next year, we'll make sure that we account
the budget
for.
has already been adjusted for lower revenues for cable utility tax.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Troutner. Any other questions or comments? And we do start our conversations next Monday, so we'll be seeing a lot of Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
All right, thank you.
All right, next up we have medical and stop-loss contracts, and we have Laura. Hello, welcome.
Laura Hoya, HR Benefits Manager. Today I brought three contracts for renewal. The medical plan with Kaiser Permanente for a 1-year renewal, Premier Administrative Services for 3 years, and stop-loss insurance with LifeWise for 1 year. For the medical plan, the city contracts with Kaiser Permanente for the city's fully insured health maintenance organization. The renewal had a 7.2% rate increase for 2024, which was approximately $38,500 per year. The medical administrative services, the city contracts with Premera Blue Cross for to be the third-party administrator for the medical claims processing and to provide access to their network of doctors and hospitals. The city is self-insured for this program, and we usually send the funds over for the weekly medical claims costs. Our current contract had a 1.9% increase for 2024 and was scheduled to expire at the end of 2024. Premera offered an early 3-year renewal with a 1.3% rate decrease for 2024 and then 2% escalators in 2025 and 2026. And for stop-loss, the city contracts with LifeWise for our individual and aggregate stop-loss insurance coverage. The best offer received for 2024 was from LifeWise, with an increase in the policy deductible from $200,000 to $275,000, a 30.2% premium decrease, which was about $372,000 savings, and a premium refund potential if the policy has a year-end loss ratio of 70% or better. Contracting with LifeWise gives us also an additional discount because they're integrated with Premera already on the stop-loss integration fee. This stop-loss policy provides added coverage to the city for individual medical claims exceeding $275,000 per employee or per dependent for each calendar year. Medical costs exceeding this amount are reimbursed to the city under this policy. Our recommendation is to renew with these vendors based on the strength of their plans, the overall cost, the discounts that we've received for 2 of them, customer service, overall administration, and billing accuracy. And the cost for these contracts is budgeted in the health and wellness plan. Any questions?
Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam President. On the stop loss, you mentioned like a 7% a refund if the year-end losses ratio less than 7%. Do we typically get a refund?
This is new.
Oh, it's new.
This is something that they offered this year, so we didn't have it before. And I can tell you that right now, for this year, we're at, as of July, we're at 11.7% loss ratio, and we're estimating to receive, based on this, about $144,000 back. So we'll see through the end of the year.
All right, thank you.
And a half. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Laura? All right. Thank you, Laura. I'll make a motion now. I move to authorize the mayor to approve the renewal of following contracts: medical plan with Kaiser Permanente for 1 year, Primera Administrative Services for 3 years, stop loss insurance with LifeWise for 1 year, all subject to approval of final terms and conditions by the acting human resources director and the city attorney.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much, Laura. All right, next up we have 3 items, 3 new neighborhoods with our Tracy Taylor. Welcome.
Thank you, Council President, members of the council. For the record, my name is Tracy Taylor. I am a communications coordinator here in the city. So I'm bringing forward to you today 3 new neighborhoods in the city. And if we want to advance the slide here, we will move on forward. These are the 3 new neighborhoods that we are going to introduce you to tonight. Garrison Glen. And they have about 32 households. We have Hillshire Terrace with 68, and Nature Trails Townhomes, better known as Springwood. They have 44 new households as well. So currently in the city, we have 52 registered neighborhoods in the city of Kent, all of which have either neighborhood councils or HOAs. I work directly with all 52. We have consistent communication. I'm invited to attend their meetings on whether it be a biweekly, a weekly, or a monthly basis. And then I bring the information back from those meetings to the mayor, talk to her a little bit about what's happening. So with those 52 neighborhoods, we encourage them to form their councils, and this is to organize and identify their neighborhood needs and interests. I discuss that with them. Also develop neighborhood action plans. We talk a lot about public safety and, of course, how they can be more vigilant and aware in their neighborhoods, and I encourage the Kent PD Block Watch program with Stacy and Sarah in the community education. Also make recommendations for neighborhood improvements. So if they bring forward something that they're interested in, we can discuss that. They have access to neighborhood grants. We have an amazing grant program in the neighborhood program. We have Drinks in the Driveway, which some of you are familiar with. We have their neighborhood newsletter, and then, of course, special neighborhood workshops. At the end of the year, I conduct a grant workshop with those neighborhoods and their HOA council presidents as well. We discuss the neighborhood grants and how they can get their piece, so to speak, whether it be through their neighborhood improvements or with their communications or their newsletters that they have. So with that, I'm going to start with the Hillshire Terrace neighborhood. 68 homes. They are single-family homes. They are very active in social events. We had a Drinks in the Driveway there a couple of weeks ago, all of which are very, very interested in becoming a registered neighborhood. They have a lot of improvements they'd like to see to that neighborhood, and so with them being a registered neighborhood, it gets them access to that grant. Also, with Garrison Glen, we had a Drinks in the Driveway with them a couple of weeks ago as well. 32 households, single-family homes. They are really interested in their neighborhood picnics, holiday parties, their neighborhood block watch, and, of course, National Night Out. And finally, the Nature Trails Townhomes are 44 households, all of which are townhomes, multifamily townhome units. They are interested in community safety and, of course, getting out their community newsletter. And so the benefits of being a registered neighborhood here in the city gives them access to the grants to fund community projects and enhance their neighborhood livability. Events and initiatives like Drinks in the Driveway, which provides opportunities for residents to engage directly with city officials and discuss and address their concerns. And of course, offering workshops, support, and direct access to the leadership team. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Tracy. Any questions? Councilmember Troutner, followed by Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Council President. It's good to see you on this side instead of out there taking pictures. Thank you for coming. I know when I first started on council, I believe we had under 50 neighborhoods that participated. Do you have any goals to see this grow? Any encouragement for neighborhoods that are looking at taking part in this program?
Well, the good thing is the outreach. So I started this position in the city about 2 years ago, and I reached out to a lot of the existing, if not some of the newer neighborhoods. For goals, yes, we would like to see at the end of 2025, possibly 60. Right now, we're making a really strong pace into 2025, especially now into 2024. But yeah, we'd like to see 60. We have a lot of new development going up, and I'm working directly with our economic and community development team to get in touch with some of their councils and hopefully establish a registered neighborhood there.
Awesome. It's a great program. I'd like to see more communities participate. Thank you.
You're good? Okay. I have a quick question, Tracy. Thank you so much for your presentation and all the work that you do in the community. Are all of these 52 neighbors engaged and they participate and communicate with the city regularly, or kind of some of them are just...
Some of them, yes. Not all of them are engaged. Some of them, since COVID, have fallen by the wayside. They're still there, but they're not as engaged, and I do encourage that. I do send weekly emails to them, finding out what's happening, and try to keep that open line of communication with them. Some of them meet on a regular basis, and some of them just don't. And so, but I do reach out to them on a consistent basis to find out what's happening in their neighborhood.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, I will make all three motions then. All right. I move to adopt resolution number 2078, recognizing the Hillshire Terrace Neighborhood Council, supporting its community building efforts, and conferring on it all opportunities offered by the city's neighborhood program.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Any questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Second one. I move to adopt resolution number 2079, recognizing the Garrison Glen Neighborhood Council, supporting its community building efforts, and conferring on it all opportunities offered by the city's neighborhood program.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much. Now we're on to the last one. I move to adopt resolution number 2080, recognizing the Nature Trails Townhomes Springwood Neighborhood Council, supporting its community building efforts and conferring on it all opportunities offered by the city's neighborhood program.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. And next up, we have Economic and Community Development. Councilmember Larmer, please.
Thank you, Council President. So we have three presentations tonight. The first two will require action. So we will start with the Waller Purchase and Sale Agreement, and Kurt Hansen to present.
Good afternoon, Council President, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity here. So this afternoon, coming here seeking authorization to pursue a purchase and sale agreement for a piece of property in our downtown. This piece of property. So it's 115 Naden Avenue South. You're probably familiar with the general area. It's right down the street. This is adjacent to part of the larger Naden Assembly. We have 23 lots now under current city ownership. And this is a result of kind of an unfortunate series of events. Starting in February of this year, there was a fire that took the house down that is in the picture there. And then a month later, another fire, followed by two more fires in the following 2 months. So 4 fires in about 6 months at this property. That series of events started code enforcement actions. It's an abatement issue. We have a nuisance property there where there is severe risk to public safety and welfare out there. It's an attractive nuisance. People are still coming and going from the site, and obviously we don't want another fire or any kind of injuries there. Then there's the first responders. You can understand their take. They're also sick of going out there, putting the same fire out at the same location. So We went through the code enforcement process and started the proceedings. The owner in this case is an older person, lives out of state, limited resources, wants to do everything she can to kind of help the city out, but again, limited resources being what they are, we had to work with her, and we got authority from her to go ahead and abate the property, meaning clean up the dangerous situation out there with a demo contract. That contract and work should take place next week to clean up the site. The way it's going to work out at a minimum is if we don't pursue the purchase sale agreement, we would just lien the property and then be paid out of any proceeds when the property sells. So there is some risk there that the demo work is about $40,000. I think it's a $43,000 contract. So that's out there. But again, we would have a lien position on the property that if and when the property sells, $43,000 would come back to the city. Talking with the property owner about the proceedings and kind of where we are, I will say she's got the best of intentions and wants to do what's right there. She did notify the city that she would like to sell the property. So we started talking to her about that as a concept, and we've gone back and forth many times. We have come to an agreement on price. It's in the memo there for you, but again, this afternoon, we are seeking authorization to pursue that agreement. So it is not done yet. We're trying to be very transparent with her and open door. We want to go back and forth till she's satisfied and we're satisfied on the price, but we have an agreed number, but we have not signed yet. And so for obvious reasons, we need council authority before something like that were to occur. A little bit of background on the why. You can see Naden Avenue is the north-south there, and then immediately to the west is the highway. So this is a 5,000 square foot piece of land immediately south of an existing business, the attorney's office there. The 5,000 square feet on its own probably has limited value, just I'm going to say to the open market, because underneath Naden Avenue is a 5-foot sewer main. There's a force main from the county. So you're not going to put a structure over the top of Naden, regardless of what we do with New Naden. And then, of course, you have the highway on the other side. So you have a real kind of constricted development envelope there, which does limit what you're going to do, what the market could do with that property. It is, however, a good ad for the assembly when you look at the whole, because what I just mentioned is static. That doesn't change no matter who develops the site. That sewer main is going to be there. So realistically, if something is going to happen on the larger assembly to the east there, on the Naden proper, it's going to be flat work that happens. So you can pave it, you could do things like that, parking. You're not going to be able to put a structure there because of the sewer. So a large structure. So there's limited resource, limited utility to somebody in the future, frankly, that isn't part of the larger assembly. That's kind of where we are. Some of this is, again, we're doing everything we can to kind of secure this one, but we need your authority to do so. So happy to try and answer any questions if there are any.
Yeah, any questions? Councilmember Boyce?
Thank you, Councilman Warren. Hey, Kurt, did I hear you say that the cleanup was $43,000?
$43,000.
And then she's going to set up for $140,000?
That's correct.
I mean, roughly. So that means, her proceeds would be less than the 43 out of the
That's
140.
correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank
So
you.
just for some perspective too, the last property that the city acquired a little further south and to the east in the assembly, if you recall, was a Puget Sound Energy kind of a remnant piece that was done there. It was an odd shape, but similar size. It was around 5,000 feet. We paid $28 a foot, which when you just do this, 5,000 feet, 147, it's $28 a foot. So we tried to right size it so council would have a good feeling of what the value is there. So.
Thank you.
Councilmember Michaud?
Thank you, Councilmember Larmer. Thank you for this presentation, Kurt. What budget, where would this money come from?
Good question. So I can tell you it would be general funds, but I would love it if somebody from finance could back me up on that, or at least give me the high sign. I think that is correct. So it would be a general fund expenditure. Again, the idea is proceeds. I'm sorry, the demo itself, the $43,000 would come back, or if we buy this effectively, we just wouldn't be, we'd pay $97,000 or whatever the math is there. So it's a fairly low acquisition cost, but at the same time is value to the assembly in the future is beneficial. So.
Are there any other questions on that end? No. So one last question for me, and this will become part of the assembly, or there's no, I mean.
That's correct.
Nobody could say, no, we still don't want it.
Well, I mean, I suppose they could do that, but the reality is when we go to the market for, development plans there, we would include this in the assembly.
Okay.
The lot lines that you see on the map now, effectively just blur those, because when we go to the market for a future redevelopment concept, we're just going to sell the acreage.
Right, so it sounds to me like eventually we'll get the money back. So, okay. If there's no other questions, I'll read the motion. So I move to approve the purchase of the Waller property located at 115 Naden Avenue South for $140,000 should the city and the property's owner agree on final terms of the purchase and sale. Do I have a second?
Second.
With a second, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any not in favor? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Kurt. Okay, next up we have, I'm sorry, scrolling back up to the top.
There you go.
Thank you. Next, we have the motion to support the establishment of the Kent Valley Air and Space Manufacturing Roundtable with Michelle Wilmot.
Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, council members. Michelle Wilmot, City of Kent Economic Development. I am here to share an exciting and strategic initiative with you called the Kent Valley Air and Space Manufacturing Roundtable. It should be no surprise, given all of the presentations you've heard from me on space and aerospace, but Kent Valley is a critical hub for air and space manufacturing. And this roundtable gives a significant opportunity to really address some of the challenges and opportunities that the industry overall is facing. Just by the way of background, the aerospace and space industries in South King County are at a very pivotal moment. These industries contribute, in South King County alone, over $13 billion. The total for King County is $19 billion, so you can see that the majority of this impact is greatest here in South King County, and it's a huge contributor to our local economy. There is also 60,000 jobs associated with this, so it is a hugely important industry for our region. The industry, though, is experiencing serious challenges associated with technological advancements, workforce shifts, and probably most seriously, global competition. Likewise, we want to see this industry evolve so we can ensure its continued success and growth. We've talked a lot with our partners about focused industry collaboration, and we believe that now is a really great and ideal time to address some of these challenges as a group. You should remember hearing something about this when you had your joint meeting with the school board last spring. Bill Ellis, my colleague, presented to you all some discussion about STEM opportunities and increasing engagement in STEM education for kids in our region. And this roundtable aims to serve as a collaborative platform for us, where industry leaders and educators, government representatives can all align on educational programs that actually meet industry needs. And by working together, we hope to ensure the workforce development that is what industry needs, that is specifically, like what have they told us they need, and we can build our education programs to meet those. That will drive economic vitality in our region. And just to let you know, we are not making this up on our own. We are being driven by an example that has been used as a national platform for industries across the country. It's known as Next Generation Sector Partnerships. It's a model that's been implemented in, I think, about 25 states with different industries across the board across the country. Letting you know, too, that we've garnered significant support for this initiative already. We've been working with our college presidents, with our schools, with Superintendent Vela, with our mayors here in South King County to put this together. We have a national expert on board who has local ties. This national expert I referenced with the Next Generation Partnership, she actually lives over on Bainbridge Island, has been consulting with us. Superintendent Vela and the college presidents with Green River College and Renton Technical College have been meeting with us regularly. They have already expressed their support for this. And Mayor Ralph has already secured support from our neighboring cities with Mayor Bacchus in Auburn and Mayor Pavone in Renton, and then Mayor McLeod in Tukwila is close behind. They're getting there. They're not quite there yet with Tukwila. But to ensure that everybody is in the know what we're up to, we are briefing industry executives right now. We've got 2 different sessions planned later this month. These are for C-suite executives to get together to hear how this roundtable will come together and how they can implement this national model that will work best for them. We are also briefing our largest employers like Boeing and Blue Origin. We're briefing our education partners separately, and we're also briefing our industry organizations like the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance or the AFA or the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition. That meeting is actually happening this Friday. So what we hope before we actually launch this roundtable is that everybody will have a good and clear understanding of what each of the roles are, what the benefits are, and what the roles of each of these different stakeholder groups is. So what's in it for cities? We believe that this provides a really great platform for focused collaboration on the competitive challenges that the industry faces. It also gives us an opportunity to understand and share the strengths, trends, and opportunities for existing companies in our region. Bill and I are always trying to learn what's going on, but this will be a really great way to hear from industries together collectively on some of their challenges and share those with people that can help solve some of these challenges. This also helps us with retention and our growth strategies that Bill and I are always looking for. Business recruitment, business retention, business attraction. Those are some of our things, but this is very specific to the aerospace and space industry for our region. This will also give us an opportunity and a meaningful venue for everybody to collaborate together instead of operating in silos, which so many of us do. There's complex needs in the aerospace industry, and working together, we can really align our efforts for broader and more positive impact across our region. As far as the role for the City Council, we wanted to bring this to you because with your support, you will help us garner additional support across the region and from other entities. It'll help us just really solidify those partnerships. And further, it really will go to demonstrate our shared commitment in the success and future growth and plans for workforce development in this critical industry for our region. What we hope is that this forum will be separate than say some of the conversations that happen across industry associations. We see it as a venue for action, not just a venue for discussion. We want to see this as a pathway to job creation, talent development, and sustained economic growth. So hopefully, as this comes together with the industry executives leading this charge with us supporting their initiatives and efforts, we can make some real progress. What the plan is now, looking forward, is to, once everyone is briefed, we plan to launch this late October, early November, and you will all be invited. The industry executives, the stakeholders will all be invited. We're planning to do this at the Museum of Flight. With these folks all together, we will launch launch the roundtable and then look to have biannual or quarterly meetings at the most. It's not a whole slew of scheduled meetings just to get together, but thinking about how we can bring some early wins when it comes to collaborative efforts, say on state appropriation requests or even federal appropriation requests. We're hoping to have the industry help us figure out what we can do to get some early wins for early momentum as this establishes. So I just wanted to reiterate that your importance, your support is really important for this effort as we continue to seek additional partnership. And we're working with our neighboring cities, like I said, and we really want to be able to say that our city council is behind this effort too, collectively as a region. So you are the first to hear about it, and the others are all working on their schedules now to get this through their city councils as well. The college presidents have already received support from their boards. So we're excited to move this along, and I wanted to make sure you were all fully aware and have the opportunity to ask questions.
Wonderful. And with that, are there any questions? Councilmember Kaur.
Thank you, Councilmember Larmer. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for the amazing work you do, and thank you for bringing this forward and putting this roundtable committee kind of together. I know we've talked about it, so you do an amazing job connecting with all of our local aerospace businesses here and executives. So I think this will definitely be very beneficial to our community and our future generations and our students. So thank you so much for putting in the work here.
Thank you, Council President. Anything else from anyone? Okay, with that, I'm going to read the motion. I move to express the City Council's support for the establishment of the Kent Valley Air and Space Manufacturing Roundtable and invite participants of local aerospace industry representatives.
A second.
With a second, do we have any discussion? If no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? And it passes unanimously. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank
This is
you
going to be very
very much.
important work for us. So we
Look
appreciate
forward to
it.
keeping you posted. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Kristen Hollinsworth for our comp plan, the next two elements of it.
I've seen a lot of you lately.
Right, well, you're about to get real sick of me tonight. I'm sorry. So good evening. It's good to be here with you all tonight. I'm excited to bring forward the transportation and parks and recreation elements. As always, I get to be the messenger of the work, but this really is a collaborative effort. There's been so many different people in Parks and Public Works who have touched this, as well as Human Services Division as well. So this is a joint effort. I am just the lucky messenger. So goals for tonight, we're going to dig into the major changes that we're proposing for transportation element. Then we'll do the same for Parks and Recreation. And finally, we'll discuss the integration of how we're taking our previous human service element and really integrating it throughout the rest of the comprehensive plan. Project schedule, we are marching away. So we are in the in-between, getting ready right now. I think we've had every element come across my desk at least twice for proofing before it goes into its final formatting, ready for a draft release to the public. We will be releasing the draft comprehensive plan and including some online engagement with that effort, as well as the final EIS, which preps us then for the adoption of several different ordinances related to the comprehensive plan, SEPA infill exemption, and other rezone work. So a reminder that we did a substantial revision to how we're organizing the layout of the comprehensive plan. You may recall previously it had 15 different goals and vision statements in the very beginning, and they were all laudable and good, but they were really pretty individually sector specific. And so what we did is we reorganized so that we have a vision and 5 guiding principles that are informing each of the elements, and then the elements each support across those guiding principles as well. And so then each element under that talks about how it relates to the other elements in the plan, the other supporting functional plans that support it, and then it gets into conditions of Kent today, what we expect for Kent tomorrow in the next 20 years, and then the supporting goals and policies. These are the elements that we have discussed together. So you'll notice that housing is in green. We are just going to have that at workshop tonight. And then sometime in October, TBD, depending on budget, timing, and availability, we'll be bringing climate and shoreline to you all. So after tonight, we'll be in a really good spot. Transportation. So we'll start with transportation element. A little bit of a look of where we're at now. Right now, the transportation element has 5 goals and 69 policies. The transportation element is a little bit unique because when we adopted the transportation master plan in 2021, we actually repealed the existing transportation element and said, we're going to put the TMP goals and policies as a placeholder until we come back at a future date for the comprehensive plan periodic update. And so if you look at the comp plan right now, it actually includes the full transportation master plan. And that was by design for a stopgap period because there was so much good work that was done in that plan. We wanted to make sure we were recognizing the transformation into a multimodal level of service network that recognizes the importance of a variety of different modes to get around Kent. And so the TMP really, it built on previous efforts, but it really set a new course for how we're doing transportation planning in the city. So it has that layered network approach looking at a variety of different modes. And so what we're aiming to do for this comprehensive plan is say, TMP, you are a functional plan that implements the comprehensive plan. You are great as is. We're gonna put you back into your functional plan category, and we're going to have the important pieces that needed to be updated during the comprehensive plan process back as its own standalone element. So if you think about that inverted triangle that I've talked about, instead of doing a separate effort because we knew this one was coming along, we kind of did a control place save, and now we're going to put it back so that we have that hierarchy of plans. But really the big thing to note is that what we did in 2021, and I say we, I was not here, what our wonderful Parks and Rec, ECD, and Public Works was leading the effort, what they did when they were working on this as a staff and came to you as a city, what they did is really an overhaul of all of the goals and policies. So all those goals and policies are going to be in our transportation element. There's some minor adjustments to address things that PSRC and the county were still working out since 2021. We also are adding in a new policy to address Target Zero, which is the plan that's being led by David Payne, and it's that goal to eliminate traffic deaths and serious injuries. We also are adding in some additional language to strengthen our coordination efforts and the need for coordination, especially as we think about things like connection to SeaTac Airport or any future metro transportation improvements that may be coming into the city. So the one thing that's actually in the body of the transportation element in the narrative, so similar to capital facilities and utilities where there's an overview of documentation of all the different facilities that we have in the city, transportation also has something similar. And we have this one map that was from our 2009 TMP update, and it's a roadway functional classifications map. And what that means is it lays out how we intend different levels of roadway to be used in our city. So you may know the terms arterial or collector or principal. What we needed to do, so in 2021 when we updated our TMP, one of our action items for implementation was we need to update this map that's in the comprehensive plan to reflect the new TMP. And so there's 2 major changes that are happening here. I want to get into them, but I want to highlight they're really pretty relatively minor. So really what this is doing is this is the map that guides when either city projects or private design and development projects such as a new multifamily development are coming in, and it sets the standards of what the roadway should be. Right now, the changes that we're going to do will help bring us into better alignment with actual reality. So the first one is we're going to be updating some of the names and classifications, which are on this far right side, to match what the state and federal classifications are. So doesn't actually change anything other than the naming terminology will be consistent across. And that's just because over time agencies have different names for things, and so we're bringing it back into alignment. The second thing is what we are calling a right sizing of existing realities. So in 2009, the TMP did not recognize multimodal right-of-ways. It did not recognize certain aspects that are included in our new TMP. And so one of the things that I've heard is the idea of expanding roadways unlimitedly is a thing of the past. We don't have the funding for it, and it's really not a best practice anymore in transportation. It's to look at what the existing right-of-way is and meet the needs within that. And so the TMP does a really good job of identifying which roadways should be widened and which shouldn't, as opposed to saying every roadway should be really, really wide. And so really what this is doing is when we're having projects come before you all, or when we're working with review of private development and looking at the right-of-way, it's asking for the appropriate amount of right-of-way instead of asking for potentially more than we need. And then that comes at a cost, right? So it means that developers may not be able to get as many housing units or other economic opportunities on their property if we're asking for more land than we really need. And so this is just right sizing to what the 2021 TMP already called for our streets. We do have a meeting, so we've talked with our advisory group and Land Use and Planning Board about this. I think the group that will be most interested is the Master Builders Association, who are frequently the ones who want to talk about right-of-way dedications with us, and so we do have a meeting planned for October with them to dig into this further. So moving into Parks and Recreation, this is very similar in that since 2015, when the last periodic update happened, we have done as a city a lot of work on not one, but 2 park and open space plans, plus a recreation plan. And so what we are doing is, again, supporting and recognizing and honoring the extensive community engagement and efforts that were done, and reflecting that into our new update. So we know that Kent parks are really special, and it's something we hear from the community all the time. We also know that as Kent grows, the needs and the population of what they would like are changing and diversifying. And so the 2022 Parks and Open Space Plan continues to establish those goals and identify strategic projects to meet the needs of our community. In 2016, they had switched to a more robust level of service measurement, and so 2022 continues that through and will be integrated into the comprehensive plan update. So again, the biggest change I think in this one is that previously the organization and flow of the goals and policies didn't necessarily totally make sense. In the middle, there's something about using low impact design standards, and then later there's talks about how to design and maintain facilities. And so there's just a lot of reorganization just for better read and clarity of kind of understanding what the overall recreation, what the overall open space, arts and cultural purposes are, and then at the end is where we talk about how we design, manage, and maintain our facilities, and then how we're measuring going forward. And so that's really the juxt of the change. The Park and Open Space Plan also included a lot of really wonderful policies and goals about promoting celebration of cultures, environmental protection, and resiliency, and so those are included in as well. And then finally, the human services element. So the human services element is a not required, so optional element that Kent has had in its comprehensive plan. When we met as a city team of staff technical experts very early in this project, we took a hard look at it and said, how is the human services element being implemented, and what goals is it achieving? And what we found is that there's a lot of really good information in the human services element, but it's also very duplicative from some other pieces, because the human services element is largely built on previous plans that come out of our human services division. And so the first thought that we had as a team, and as we were discussing, was it makes sense because human services is kind of, it touches the people in the plan element, is let's integrate this throughout the plan so that as the different elements are identifying ways to serve the community, we're also considering connection to resources and things that encourage a healthy, inclusive, and supportive environment. And so we're not throwing everything out, we're reintegrating it into the plan. A way to think of this is including human services and health in all elements going forward. So with that, a lot of the demographic and socioeconomic data, as well as a background of other division services and programs, will be in our introduction chapter, where it talks about who we are as Kent and what our aspirations are. And then a lot of them will also end up in the land use element, where we talk about community-centered design, essential public facilities, and innovation and shared prosperity, and beautiful environment. And so with that, there are some other elements that support it as well that we've integrated, especially into parks and recreation and into transportation for access to services and needs. Economic development, off the top of my head, has several that relate to job opportunities and supporting. One example is talking about access to childcare to support working mothers and working parents. And so there's integration throughout, and that was a much more integrated way for us to, sorry, I'm saying that word a lot. It's a way for us to think beyond just strict department requirements or typical division assignments into how can we work as one Kent, as one city to work together. So that is our flyby overview of those elements. We have a workshop tonight to talk about housing. And then just a quick reminder and call outs on a couple other things that are going to be on your calendars that you may or may not be aware of or want to attend. September 23rd is, I think that's everyone thinks budget. I think budget, and it is also our special land use and planning board meeting. We're going to be starting at 7 instead of 6, and that'll be a hearing for the Behavioral Health Facilities Code update. It'll be in this room. And then we will be coming back to Land Use and Planning Board and you all for workshops to work through some remaining topics before we release our draft on October 11th. That feels like it's just around the corner. I heard that Christmas is 99 days away, and that made me excited and sad all at once. And then I would like to invite you all on October 30th. It's our final community advisory group meeting. This has been a really fantastic group from the community, representing residents, employees, employers, community-based organizations. We're going to have a celebration. So we're going to talk about the draft comprehensive plan, get any final feedback before we move into the hearing process. And then we're also going to talk to them about what to expect next. Of the work, really, this is the beginning. Now the work really starts getting into the details of a lot of our policies and moving the code. And so this is going to be a fun celebration. We'd love for you all to attend, and I'll send a separate email with details on that.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Well, wonderful job, thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you in a few more minutes.
Can't wait.
With another element. Thanks, Kristen.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Larmer. Thank you, Kristen. And with that, we are adjourned until 5:15 for our council workshop. See you then. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to Kent City Council Workshop for Tuesday, September 17. We have one item on our agenda, 2044 Comprehensive Plan Update, Housing Element. And we have Kristen Halsworth here. Welcome again.
Good evening. It is a great pleasure and excitement to be able to talk to putting all of the pieces together. We started about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, talking about these new requirements from the state and what was happening at the county and negotiation processes, and to be able to say we've made it through that and now we have a plan for how we're addressing it and not just complying, but really have a really innovative vision for Kent's housing in the future, I think is really exciting. So tonight we're going to talk again, just reframing and refreshing our memories on some of those state, regional, and county housing requirements. Then we'll talk about housing needs in Kent, and then talk specifically about the goals and policies, and then we'll be discussing next steps. Because with housing, this is one where we have started and already done a lot of work, and the work continues as well. And so we'll talk about things that we have already in the queue, started to work on implementing this housing element. So a quick update, the Growth Management Act is really the big thing that changed since 2015. So the state adopted a new law that said we must not just have capacity for housing in our city, but we need to look at it to address housing needs by income levels, and it has to be done in an equitable manner so that we're addressing regional, meaning county in this case, needs for housing. That is a huge change that all cities were kind of trying to figure out what that meant and what our numbers meant. PSRC and King County then updated their multi-county and countywide planning policies to reflect that. Since 2015, we also have adopted our Kent Housing Options Plan, which had a lot of this in groundwork of what our community housing needs were and where we saw opportunities in the future. We also did, last year we reported on an existing conditions and baseline assessment, and then we've had 2 really extensive rounds of community engagement specific to our preferred land use alternative, and that's going to tie directly into how we're meeting our housing needs as well. So a recap of what's happened since 2020, HB 1220 is the big one that we're going to be discussing tonight. It was a multi-part bill that I think because of COVID and everyone figuring out online legislative sessions kind of snuck in under the radar as like, okay, we're just going to have to plan for housing. That sounds good. And then when we got into what it actually meant in the bill, there's 3 major components. One is about addressing housing needs by levels of affordability, which we've talked a lot about. The other is documenting and addressing housing disparate impacts that exist in our communities today and how we got there. And then the third is a requirement to allow emergency housing and to plan for capacity for that emergency housing. So tonight we're going to dig into these 3 components especially. There's other bills that we've talked about. Middle housing is due, our code updates are due in June 2025. Accessory dwelling units, we've by and large addressed that even before the state updated their bill. And so we allow 2 ADUs per unit already. There's one remaining piece on parking that we're going to tie into middle housing. And then the other 2 are really on our work plan for 2025 because they have 2025 due dates of allowing the conversion of existing buildings that are in mixed use zones to allow residential uses and to lower some of the permitting requirements for them. And then allowing co-living housing, which is where individuals have their own sleeping quarters, but they share the common areas such as the kitchen and bathrooms and living area or study areas. And so those are 2 that we actually have provisions in our code for our low density single family residences already for that, but it's now required throughout our multifamily and mixed use areas as well. So this number is, if it's...
So 1042, did you say we already did that last year?
No, accessory dwelling units we did last year.
Okay, but the conversion we're still working
of existing, on. So the numbers are the dates that the bills were adopted,
okay,
not when we are doing the work.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, that's confusing on my part.
Thank you.
The number 10,200 new housing units, that's what we need by 2044 by the state process. What that looks like in reality is really interesting because Kent is very different than a lot of other areas. South King County has very similar numbers, not quite the same. Over 60% of our housing units are supposed to be at 80% or higher AMI. So that means really workforce housing and market rate housing. And that's not too surprising because Kent has been a more affordable area of the community. This far left, it looks like a steep number. It's actually much less than most other cities in King County. So there is a need from 0 to 30% across King County. Every city has a pretty steep bar on the left side. Normally, they also have steep bars here and maybe here. We're really unique in that we need market rate housing to support, not just to create regional equity in King County, but also they took into account the fact that there's a lot of jobs here that have that income that we want to reduce commutes on our highways and on other state routes and improve also climate and other environmental goals. So a little bit of that regional context again. So when we look at East Side cities versus South King County cities, the total number of housing units is pretty darn close. We have about the same number of housing units in these two areas. We have already double the number of income restricted units in South King County compared to the East Side city. So when we see these numbers, this is just for income restricted, meaning that there's some sort of federal or state or city or county program that's subsidizing the units through vouchers or through development like LIHTC housing credits they're marketed and regulated for periods of affordability. This doesn't take into account the already naturally occurring affordable housing that we have in our region. So when we look at what that means, this really shows up clearly when we look at the comparison of blue is Kent and green is the average of King County. And so you can see that reflected when we have the lower bar and King County has higher. It means in order to achieve that equity between the region, we actually have more of those units, so we need less in the future going forward proportionally for our new housing stock. And then when you see our bar higher, it means we need more of those units in the future to make it more equitable across the distribution. And so this is really, it's not just we need housing for higher incomes in Kent, it's also we need housing for people that work in Bellevue but are living in Kent because they can't afford to live in Bellevue and they are having to spend 2 hours each day, each way to get to their work. So it's a broader context conversation of part of what 1220 did. You all remember that we talked about our preferred alternative. Some of those assumptions in our alternative are looking at, okay, what do we expect for just new market rate detached housing? What would we expect through middle housing coming online through the state law and our own efforts? And then what would we expect through the conversations that we've had along the East Hill for Benson and Kent Canley, and continuing with our already planned efforts in downtown, the Industrial Valley, and Midway. And so there's a range of units that can be expected. This is a 20-year planning process. So as you can imagine, for me to say we're for sure going to create 3,675 units that are at 80% AMI is a little bit too on the nose for what a 20-year projection would be. And so what we do is we say if we didn't assume anything, and we take what Commerce says for the levels of affordability for these different types of housing units, what would we expect that to be? And then we also know, Commerce says most multifamily is going to be affordable at 80%. We also know that there may be areas where it's more expensive to rent a multifamily because it's a new product, or we may know, like in Kent, that there's actually deep subsidies that have come in for several of our developments on the West Hill especially, and so it may actually be much lower than 80%. So when we do those market adjustments, we land very close in the proximity to what the aggregate need for HB 1220 is. We feel like we're in close enough proximity to meeting it. One of the things is we are slightly lower on our 120% AMI than what's called for, and that's just like it or not, we can't control the market conditions, and really the way to create that more affordable housing product would be to have bigger houses on more land, and we're not expanding our urban growth boundary or city boundary, so there's not many things we have in our toolbox to do that on our own. And we aren't totally meeting that need for the 120% AMI. We've been told by the state and by King County, don't worry about it if you're not meeting the 120%. We're really looking to make sure you're meeting those lower income categories, which we are meeting and exceeding in these thresholds that we're looking at. So another part of HB 1220 was specifically calling out emergency housing. The state defines emergency housing as indoor accommodations that are temporary to address basic health, food, clothing, and personal hygiene needs. The best way I can describe this is the way that the state sees this and the way the bill is written for requiring emergency housing is everything has to be under one roof. So it could be a community shelter at a local church where they have beds or cots, and then they also have facilities that allow for showers, for restrooms, and then food provided. That would count because it's all under one roof. Someone doesn't need to leave and go outside into the elements. What they don't count are things, types of units like outdoor tent encampments. One of the things that the state provided guidance on is it also does not include tiny houses and pallet shelters, because while they may have temporary housing for a place to sleep, you traditionally in the models would need to leave that sleeping location to go to use the restroom or use a shower or to have some sort of cooking or food provided. And so tiny houses and pallet shelters do not meet the requirements of meeting these emergency housing. So we've talked about this broad income spectrum of housing from 0% to 120%. There's this other bar on every city's table that says, here's the amount of emergency housing you need over the next 20 years. County-wide, that number is close to 60,000 units. What we need in Kent is about 2,000 units, so 1,949. Right now, we have about 10% of that existing and documented. So over the next 20 years, we need to make sure that we have capacity for that. The state also included a new rule for indoor emergency housing that says we cannot prohibit indoor shelters in areas where hotels are allowed. So that is something we actually have already been in compliance with. We updated our code back in 2021 or 2022, I believe, to be in compliance with this requirement. So really what we're looking at here for the emergency housing is how does this happen? And really what our leverage on the city's end are two. Land use capacity, do we have it allowed in zones and enough capacity of that land that roughly 2,000 new housing units or beds or combination thereof could happen? And when we ran the numbers from our preferred alternative, the answer was yes. So that's good news. The second part is funding. We are not required to make sure those units get built. That's a much broader conversation. We do, through SCIP, contribute to a housing capital fund, which can fund those, and we'll talk about some of our contributions that we've done before. But that's really the extent of where the city has its authority for indoor emergency shelters. The rest is really through a lot of other human services, county and state and federal funding resources. So we in Kent are playing our part in terms of saying there's the land available. Honestly, without even doing this comprehensive plan update, we were in compliance with this. We are going to be expanding capacity further through some of the work that we're doing. I want to just give that takeaway of the state has very specific requirements regarding indoor emergency housing and what that means and what qualifies for it. The third part of HB 1220 is barriers to housing.
Councilmember Fincher has a question.
How many beds do we have now?
We have just under 200.
Thank you.
Continue, please.
Thank you. So the third part of HB 1220 is barriers to housing. So this is looking at historic and current policies and practices that have led to disparate impacts or outcomes in access to housing, and also using a racial equity lens to identify that. So I think what we normally think about as redlining, there were several historic practices from the federal government and through implementing agencies, especially starting in the 30s. Redlining was actually started to help stabilize the housing market. So it had at its core, it was intended to help during the Great Depression. The Federal Housing Authority and other agencies took that direction and mapped out where there were perceived risk investments. And that correlated pretty directly with where there were Black and people of color populations. And so that resulted in designating them as high-risk areas, which were then ineligible to get federally backed loans. And so Black and households of color did not have the opportunity to access funding and financing in the same way that white households did. That had further implications down the road with generational wealth accumulation as well. One thing that further compounded that is in the 1940s, the GI Bill, or the VA loan, was established. And while the VA loan itself did not explicitly exclude people of color from applying, because of redlining and the practices for getting the loans was in place, it meant that there were already discriminatory and lending practices that were resulting in further segregation. So I think we hear a lot about redlining. It is the most obvious, on the nose, absolutely kind of this was a discriminatory process. In Kent, we cannot find any history of redlining, and that's largely because when you think of that time, we were still very agrarian. And so Seattle is one of the only cities in King County, if not the only city, that actually had redlining maps that are documented. And so this picture shows a difference between some of the neighborhoods today, present conditions of those that were redlined versus those that were not. So even though Kent wasn't specifically subject to redlining, the impacts can still be felt on a regional level. And so it means they still contribute to disparities that are realized today, including lower home values and lower rates of ownership by communities of color. And then those lower home ownership rates means that communities that are from those redlined communities areas that may be at further risk of displacement are also ending up today being perpetuated by financial pressures, and we know this, are coming from areas that are higher cost into Kent. So we're on the receiving end of those policies as well. Other regional efforts, so prior to European settlement, this area was inhabited by indigenous tribes since the end of the last ice age. And the Kent area was previously occupied by two distinct tribes. They were called the people of the Inside and the people of the Lake. In 1855 was the Treaty of Point Elliott. It was signed by the governor of the territory and several tribal representatives. And today it's considered one of the most important documents to Native American tribes in the Puget Sound. Of interesting to note, it secured sovereignty rights for tribes, and Duwamish signed it even though they were not specifically listed in the treaty. So the Duwamish tribe traditionally settled in occupied territories in Seattle and south of Seattle, and they were one of the top signatories, and they were not included in this treaty, which led to a lot of conflict in the Kent Valley region, especially as white settlers were given land and then constantly facing consternations with who really had access to the land. So today we know that Duwamish peoples and their relatives do not own their own tribal lands, and many have relocated to other established lands such as Tulalip. Kent was incorporated in the 1890s, and the city's history is marked both by agricultural prosperity and rail lines. So not surprising, we had a lot of Chinese and Japanese descent immigrants coming into the city of Kent. They were drawn by the promise of agricultural and railroad infrastructure. We do have some documentation of white farmers and dairy workers that were leading to anti-Japanese labor movements and anti-Chinese labor movements. And the most clear documentation of this was during the internment camps in 1940s, when Japanese farmers left their land, and then when they came back, they no longer had any access. So today in Kent, we do continue to we have seen a shift in our population. So until the early 2000s, we had a majority white population, and now we have a plurality of multiple BIPOC populations constituting about 60%. And we anticipate that will continue to be so in the future going forward. We are, again, in this unique position that there are generational impacts of nationwide systemic income and wealth creation that we are a recipient of. There's also been in the region itself economic exclusion, and that has really affected Kent residents because existing residents are having pressures from other displaced people that are coming into Kent. And then a Kent community as a whole, whether they're new residents or not, don't have the same access to wealth and generational opportunities to buy homes. One of the things that we have found as well is the majority of people who are moving into Kent are moving from other places in the King County region. So they are coming because of pressures from other areas. So that concludes our history of what's barriers to housing in Kent. We're going to talk a little bit also about what our community conversations of what the community has said their greatest challenges and opportunities are for the next 20 years as it relates to housing. In Kent, home ownership is one thing that has been identified. So currently, 55% of households own their home. You can see the slide on the left, or the image on the left, shows how this varies by different race or ethnicity. We find that units for homeownership would help meet that requirement of HB 1220 of 80% or higher AMI. So the community is recognizing they would like to see increased homeownership opportunities. It's also reflected in the data of what our housing needs allocation is. Areas with high levels of homeownership are more resilient to economic risk and thus more likely to be able to weather greater economic instabilities. So there's been studies about King County during the 2008 recession that showed South King County was much less resilient and had much more housing instability than our counterparts in other locations. And one of those was statistically tied to levels of homeownership as well. It also is a way, again, to build generational wealth, which is one of the primary ways to build wealth in the United States. And so when we talk to the community, this was also reflected in our survey results. The far right side says it's one of the more important issues in the community, and you can see the dots are really congregated there as wanting to see increased opportunities.
I mean, other races, 49% seen awfully high. What makes up that 49%?
It would be 2 or more races normally, or not captured in these broader categories.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
So the census still doesn't do a good job of identifying, and it just says 2 or more, but then they don't get captured as a Black household or Asian household. Another identified opportunity that we heard from the community and reinforcement was wanting to see housing near transit. And so the idea of connecting to transit and connecting to job opportunities was a very strong theme we saw. We already have 2 existing transit-oriented districts in downtown and Midway. The community said, we like what we're seeing here. Continue this vision, please. Yes. We also talked about there's new bus rapid transit through the Rapid Ride I-Line along Benson coming in, and that is a lot of what's reflected in our growth alternative for that purpose. There also Metro Connects is the long-range transportation plan for the broader service area that Metro serves. There are 2 routes, one through our Industrial Valley and one along the East Hill from Highline up to the East Hill connecting over to downtown, and then along Meeker to light rail that are in their plan for a 20-year vision. And so that's something that our plan does not specifically, it doesn't have a route determined yet. It has maybe suggested areas, but it recognizes that connection could be coming in and would like to see more of those connections. And the last part is that Kent has historically been affordable, and people want to continue to see their children and their neighbors be able to live here. They want to be able to age in place and find housing units that meet their needs instead of occupying a large detached home that worked great when they may have had 3 kids at the home, but no longer need all that space, but can't find something to downsize into. And so really naturally occurring affordable housing is something that is not regulated by any individual market force in terms of funding or financing programs. And so the best thing that we can do is it's so much cheaper in the long run. It's the ounce of prevention here of keeping the existing natural affordable housing we have versus losing it and then having to rebuild more of it is incredibly difficult. And so you will see in our goals and policies, this directly ties to naturally affordable housing as well as displacement and anti-displacement measures. So what's in our draft housing element? I provided as an attachment the draft goals and policies changes. A lot of them are, I think this is one of the more substantive changes that we see. A lot of it is already a continuation of what we talked about in the Kent Housing Options Plan, and so it's putting it from the functional document into the broader goals and policies of our comprehensive plan. And then it also talks about these changes in state law, multi-county planning policies, countywide planning policies, and from the community. So first thing, lots of changes to address the new requirements. There's a prioritization on increasing housing variety and choices for all incomes. So lots of conversation about middle housing, and that's one of those options for increasing housing options for entry-level home buyers, as well as for those that age in place, which were two areas where we heard a lot around home ownership being a particular struggle in the city. There's added emphasis on preserving affordable housing that is income regulated or income restricted right now and mitigating displacement overall, and then maintaining that affordable housing that is naturally occurring. And then this is a big one too, because we can't do this alone. So housing is influenced by market rates, it's influenced by funding availability, and so leveraging and expanding our partnerships, both in terms of what's happening in our city, so talking with people that are looking to develop or redevelop, or also developers that understand codes and who's doing things really well in other areas, partnerships with them, as well as partnerships at the sub-regional, South King County level, and beyond. Some things that we are continuing to do and will continue to evaluate as we go forward. Kent has done a lot of actions that are on the list by Commerce Guidance and County Guidance on how to address and create housing as well as preserve the housing and prevent displacement. So we do have a multifamily tax exemption program. We have a downtown planned action ordinance for development in downtown that we're going to be expanding for a broader SEPA housing development infill exemption. We've done a lot of upzones already near transit, and through the process of our preferred alternative are continuing this process to increase access to opportunity of housing and jobs near transit. We have streamlined permit review processes and are continuing. I think that's a continuous effort that is iterative. And then there's other things, like I said, we were one of the cities that were interviewed by Commerce regarding shelter, transitional, emergency, and permanent supportive housing because we had been out in front of it and done some of that work beforehand. Other work that we've done beforehand, ADU code updates, and that we anticipated in KHOP and will continue to implement is middle housing. I mentioned previously we have a limited but vital role to play in funding housing affordability and preservation. We have done this collectively by grouping our funds with the SCIP Housing Capital Fund. So it's us and other jurisdictions in the South King County area. So far, 2 projects have been funded and selected out of, I think, 5 total projects that have been funded over their 2-year proposals. The last Housing Capital Fund call for projects for this upcoming year just ended. I think there was 1 project in Kent that applied for it.
Is that addition to the 2 funded?
I believe it was one of the same projects that was coming back for additional funding.
Thank you.
I guess we could say 100% of the projects that have applied in Kent have received funding. For middle housing policy implementation, this is, I as a planner get excited and think where some of the fun really starts of getting into the details of this. So we are required by June 2025 to update our development code, our Kent City Code. That sounds like, oh, it's just an update to code. It touches many, many sections of our code because of the way development standards and design guidelines are all integrated throughout. And so that'll be a time that we're planning on bringing in a consultant that has expertise in development, architecture, and planning that have been on the other side of things and actually seen development happen as well. And we're hoping to bring them in to facilitate conversations with developers to really go through our code and identify where those sticky issues are, where it may say, sure, you can develop, but actually in reality, it's becoming a problem or posing a challenge. As well as talking with the community, we are required by state law to allow 6 of the 9 middle housing types. We started some of those conversations earlier, but we'll be coming back to you all. I'm not the one to decide of what is appropriate for our community and what that looks like. And so there will be a lot of opportunities for that conversation, really digging into it. We have a lot of really great foundation of the base of the conversation on home ownership and wanting to see increased access. And so now it's digging into what makes sense for the Kent community as we implement. Wanted to highlight a couple efforts that we're doing right now as part of the comprehensive plan. You'll see these in your enacting ordinances. The first is residential land use consolidation. So right now, you can see, it's a little bit difficult to see, but this table has a lot of different residential designations, and they apply one-to-one to our zone. That was a practice that was done at some point. Best practices change over time. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're consolidating the number of residential land use designations so that as we go forward, we have a little bit more flexibility when we're talking about middle housing and what that looks like. And so you can see we're consolidating the SF3 and SF 4.5 into a scale. And so we're going, instead of having designations as single family, which we really don't have single family zones anymore, they're going to be lower density zones. We're going to change it to residential 1, 2, 3, and 4. So think of it as a ramping up of intensity of uses. And so we will still continue to retain our mixed use areas and our mobile home parks and our urban separators. But for residential, we're going to have different levels of intensity around those areas. And we kept 2 different designations for R1 and R2, mostly because around Lake Meridian, there were intentional efforts for water quality for certain zones around the lake to improve water quality. And so we wanted to make sure that we were recognizing the efforts of past councils.
So question, when we're consolidating into like residential 2,
yes.
How do we, is there still a designation between, what is it, 6 homes to an acre, 8 homes to an acre?
So the zoning will, yes, so there will still be SR6 and SR8 zoning, but the land use will be more consolidated. And that gives us opportunity when we go into middle housing then to talk about what we want underlying zoning per acre to be. Another change, this is going to seem kind of out of the blue tangential, but I wanted to make sure you're aware of it. We have a neighborhood services land use. It's only in 3 areas of the city right now, and it's proposed for a 4th. One of the things that we heard really loudly from the community was they don't want to see more gas stations on corners. Like, please stop with the gas stations. Give us true neighborhood services and amenities. And also, if it's a neighborhood service area, they want to see shops and services, not townhomes in those areas. And so we only have this in 3 areas. We're expanding it to a 4th. So we're going to be changing right now. The land use designation is neighborhood services. The zoning allows the neighborhood convenience commercial zone as well as townhomes. We're going to be removing that townhome designation from it, so it truly will be local neighborhood commercial. And then we're also proposing to remove from the use table gas stations, because right now technically they're allowed with a special permit. It's a little bit more of a barrier and a higher bar to jump through. But we felt like the community voice was pretty strong of saying, if we're going to add these, keep the gas stations along main arterial roads and not in our neighborhoods. And so that's a proposal that we wanted to bring forward to you all.
Councilmember Fincher has a question.
Thank you. Does that mean they couldn't have businesses below and maybe 3 or 4 places or 6 up above?
That does. So these were advertised as purely neighborhood commercial areas, and that was what the community was asking for, as opposed to more intense mixed use areas.
I have a question, Kristen. So is that 240th and 116th or 248th and 116th? Is it like the whole intersection or just one corner?
There's certain parts of it, not all of it. So where the,
Like the
East Hill
residential.
Nursery, that is NCC zone, so that seems to make sense to stay as a neighborhood convenience commercial amenity. South of it, there's some vacant land. Some of that we're going to allow to stay as the residential because there was a specific rezone to be MRT there. But the rest of that southern corner is going to remain as the neighborhood commercial. And then on the other side, it's there's a skate park that's not zoned that, and then I forget what's on the
Gas station and homes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So big picture, where does this go? I'm happy to dig into the goals and policies specifically. I just didn't want to stand here and read them all to you. I think you all have better uses of your time. So where we're going, with the housing legislation as well as our comprehensive plan, we took time to evaluate our needs. We've done some interim code updates for residential parking standards and for ADUs. Next, we're moving on to focusing on adoption of the comp plan. And when we get to adoption in December, that really starts a lot of other state requirements. And so we've broken them into 3 categories here for implementation and where we envision our long-range planning team spending a majority of their time. The first is let's meet state requirements so that we are doing it in the Kent context and being in compliant with state requirements for a variety of very good reasons, including funding opportunities. And so that includes the middle housing, it includes co-housing, reevaluating our step housing requirements if there's any adjustments that need to be made or slight tweaks to align with new requirements, and then allowing the conversion of existing buildings and addressing those requirements. So that is all due June 2025. There may be a couple of those that actually have a December deadline, but we're aiming to package those together into June. Meanwhile, we also have 2 other projects concurrently happening. The downtown plan has started. We've done a lot of stakeholder interviews and are working on a lot of intense conversations about what the downtown looks like. That's required by fall of 2025 for PSRC certification to keep our designation as a regional growth center. That is tremendously important for especially our transportation funding for projects that come in and through grant funds. And so continuing with that process, and then Benson Corridor, we partnered with Public Works and have funds to create a plan and update development codes and design standards and roadway standards for Benson. That effort will be a little bit longer in the making just because the project funding timeline for available use of funds and our staffing availability is a little bit more limited or extended. And so that's where we will be addressing our mixed use standards and commercial standards. So as you talk about, okay, what does this look like for my work plan for the next couple of years, we're prioritizing what has to be done and where there's opportunities to make sure that we are in alignment to remain competitive for funding that is really needed to bring into the city for those improvements and realizing the vision. Final call outs. We talked about these in the last meeting, so just a reminder, they're in your slides if you have questions. October 11th is our marching date. We will be submitting to the state for a 60-day review process, as well as to King County for their Affordable Housing Committee review process. Happy to answer questions or just listen to discussion.
Thank you, Kristen. Any comments, questions? Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President. Kristen, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for doing a great job summarizing everything and giving us a history lesson. I really appreciate you covering everything so succinctly and giving us all the info we need. So thank you.
Thank you. Me too.
Councilmember Boyce.
Yeah, ditto what Councilmember Michelle said. Don't take it personal. We haven't asked you any question, but we've been seeing this for a while and making this sausage for a long time. So it's nice to see that things are really getting closer to home. So really, I get it. I appreciate everything you've done. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? No? And I'll add on to that, Kristen. You've done an amazing job with community engagement and getting all the stakeholders involved in the process. And it's always great having conversations with you about this. And so thank you so much, and keep up the great work. And I'm sure we'll see you, a lot of you, this fall. So we'll be ready. Councilmember Fincher.
Yeah, I can talk to her about it in a little bit.
Okay, all right. Thank you. If there's no other questions or comments, I think we are adjourned until 7 o'clock. Thank you so much.
I'm your favorite person.
You finished early.
Thank you.